Welcome to Resourced and Resourceful Leadership, a podcast for people who care about the world and their impact in it. I'm Dr. Christine Pettit, and I'm so glad you're here with me. Thank you. I know I say that every week, and I really mean it. Thank you for listening in and being part of this journey with me. Thanks to those who also let me know that you're listening in, and of course at the end I'll give some invitations for that. But whether you communicate with me or not, I really appreciate you being here. The Podcasting Our Communities panel that I was on last week, I found that to be a really nice opportunity to reflect on my process of podcasting, what I'm learning from this, and what motivates me to consistently show up and produce this podcast. I think I'll have some things to share from that in the future, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. Just to say that I was really grateful for Melina, who invited me to participate, and also to the panelists that I shared the stage with. It was really cool to meet Leah, who does the Swap Meet Chronicles and the podcast Beyond the Facade. Just looking at kind of the stories behind architecture in Long Beach. And I know her co-host at times also brings in pieces connected to the paranormal, but her particular interest is really in the architecture and the kind of art and the stories behind it. And I also got to meet Melina's partner of like 7 years. And Melina is somebody I've known from the time banking community when I helped to start that back in the day. Well, it launched in 2010 and it's still going in different incarnations, but I was less active in it from about 2014 on. So just kind of that beginning period. I mean, I was definitely connected for years past that, but my real contributions were in that phase, and I think that's when Melina and I were interacting more as well. Melina has a podcast called Angel City Culture Quest, and she does interviews with artists about their work, and she also looks at issues connected to social justice and environmental justice. And we talked about doing a podcast exchange too. So lots of like nice connections, I would say, over the last few weeks. Another connection that I'm appreciating is I had the opportunity to be interviewed by Catherine Golub, the host of the Conflict Decoded podcast earlier this week. And then I'll be interviewing her in a few weeks for this podcast. And then we'll share our respective interviews with you in late May, early June. So it was cool just to talk with her because we definitely have some overlap in our kind of biographies and work experience and issues that we care about. And it was an interesting way to get to know her. Well, she got to know me more in this, but there was some exchange, and then I'm going to get to interview her. So I'm excited about that. We did also acknowledge that like interview format is, I mean, it's an interesting way to get to know somebody, but when you're thinking about it from that perspective of what the audience hears too and what might make like a cohesive narrative, then that's just like an extra layer in communication. So that's interesting. Today, I'm planning to share some reflections on leadership that have come up in my everyday work and life lately, from a workshop that I developed and led on change management last week to today, chaperoning my daughter's field trip, and then also meeting up with some friends. And these friends are leaders in many different ways, and just kind of some of the reminders that came up for me in that conversation, as well as some observations from today's field trip with third graders. So, first of all, I think there's still like a lot more that I want to share about the work that I do with the DISC assessment. And I talked about it a little bit last time, that there are 4 main personality types that the DISC assessment measures for. But even within that, the idea is that we're all a combination of the 4 styles, and there's a letter that's assigned to each quadrant: D, I, S, and C. But then you can have a mix of those letters too. I mean, it's just 2 that they pair you up with. But then you could also have like something that reaches into another letter as well. And then also it's presented on the circle, and depending on if you're closer to the middle of the circle or further to the edge, that shows, when you answered the questions, how inclined you are to that style. Some people are very inclined to their style, and others are less so. They do bring in more from the other styles, or are more moderate in their approach and the way that they answer that. And I first took the DISC assessment about a little over 10 years ago, when I was in the Nonprofit Partnerships Emerging Leader Program, which I do recommend for folks in the nonprofit space in the Southern California area, folks who want to develop and kind of step into more leadership in the nonprofit space. But anyway, I took it then, and it was just helpful for me to reflect on my style and how I show up in the workplace and beyond, really. And then also to learn about other styles and how to flex and adapt my style. And at the time, I was leading a nonprofit, and I was like, wow, it's really helpful to have this insight myself. And then I also brought it to our team, and 2 different times we brought in a facilitator, Tina Berry, who is great, and she facilitated that with the team, and it helped me also think about how I was showing up as a leader and what my colleagues and the folks that I supervised and led, what they needed from me. And it actually changed the way that I showed up in the office each morning, the way that I made sure to slow down and talk with folks and greet them before going to my desk and starting to work. And I know that might sound obvious to some of you who have a style that is more relational. Don't get me wrong, I love connecting with people, and relationships are really important to me. But when I have a task to do, or like an overflowing inbox, I can be very task oriented and just kind of jump right into it. Even like if somebody sends me a text message, they might say, "Good morning, I hope you're doing well. Do you have time to meet later today?" And I might say yes or no right away. And then I'll be like, "Oh, and good morning to you as well." Like, I know it's important to respond in kind, and to bring in that kind of like human element to it as well. But when I have like this question that's asked of me, or like this kind of task at hand, that tends to be what I gravitate toward first, and handling that piece of it. Of course, relationship building was really important in the type of work that I've done in community organizing, in leadership, and even in having a business, a coaching and consulting firm. And I really do value my friendships. And I have other things that motivate me as well that are strong. I have a strong need for impact and really seeing things through and making change for the better. And that motivates me a lot. So, anyway, enough about me. Well, a little bit more about me. When I was moving into doing more coaching and consulting and leadership development work, it just made sense for me to get certified in the DISC assessment and in providing those assessments myself and in facilitating workshops and sessions and doing coaching using that tool. And so I am an authorized partner with the Everything DISC assessment, and I do trainings in that. And one of the things that I have really found beneficial over the last couple years is learning more about how the different styles react to change and the different psychological needs connected to change. And so that piece in particular really resonated with the participants in the workshop that I was facilitating last week. They're in an organization where there's just an incredible amount of change that has happened and that will happen in the near future. So they're anticipating more change, and they're very much influenced by the political environment that we're in. And so that is constant uncertainty and navigating change and threats as well. And so they're in this just challenging time of change and needing to navigate it the best that they can. And when I shared that kind of framework of the different personality types and then layered on the psychological needs, and this is something that I learned as part of the ongoing education I get with Everything DISC and the team at Wiley. Dr. Mark Scollard shared this framework related to the psychological needs during change. And so they roughly map on to, they connect to the different personality types. So I'm going to share a little bit about that. So if you're listening and you're like, I wonder what my style is, there's an assessment for that. I'd be happy to do it with you. So please feel free to reach out. When people don't take the full assessment, we have kind of a crude way of guessing people's style. So the first question is, are you more fast-paced and outspoken, or are you more cautious and reflective in your work? So you think through that and choose, do I tend to be more fast-paced and outspoken, or do I tend to move at a more moderate pace and take time before I share? And then the second question is, are you more questioning and skeptical, or accepting and warm? So think about when you're presented with information or you meet a new person. Do you tend to take that information at face value, or have a really open mind about the person that you're meeting? Or do you tend to look at information or like a plan and see maybe where it could be strengthened, or have questions about how things are going to work? And then, when you meet new people, how are you interacting with them? Are you automatically accepting of them, or does it take a little while maybe to warm up and get a sense of who they are? So think about that too. Are you more questioning and skeptical, or accepting and warm? So taking those two questions, then you can kind of, again, this is very rough, but if you are both fast paced and outspoken and more questioning and skeptical, then that is associated with the D, or dominant style. And that style values getting immediate results, taking action, and really challenging themselves and others. If you are on that fast paced and outspoken, but you're more accepting and warm, then you might be the influence style. I's really value expressing enthusiasm, taking action as well, and encouraging collaboration. Now, if you said that you tend to be accepting and warm, but you move at a more cautious pace, you might be more skeptical, then that is associated with the S style, or steadiness. Folks in that style really value giving support, maintaining stability, and they enjoy collaboration as well. And then if you are more cautious and reflective and more in that kind of moderate, or the questioning and skeptical realm as well, then that's associated with the C, or conscientiousness style. The values of this style are ensuring accuracy, maintaining stability, and challenging assumptions. So you can see that there's some overlap too in what the styles value. And there's a slogan that goes with each one just to help you think about it as well. So that D style, the slogan is "Get it done." The I style is "Get recognized" or "Get approval." The I's are really social creatures, and they're motivated by social recognition, by group activities, by friendly relationships. Whereas those in the D style resonate more with winning, success, impact. They may be more competitive and like to have some power and authority, a voice in, or even control when it comes to decision making. So D is "Get it done." I is "Get recognized" or "Get approval." S is "Get along." Harmony is really important to the S style. They're very motivated by stable environments, sincere appreciation, cooperation, and opportunities to help. And then the C style is "Get it right." So they like to use opportunities to use their expertise or gain knowledge, and they really pay attention to the quality of work and correctness. So I'm curious, as you're listening, what style do you think that you fit into? What resonates most with you? Or do you think you might be a combination of the styles? So then, as you think about that, it's important to, when you layer on the element of change, each of these styles has different needs when it comes to change. So for the D style, control and agency is important. freedom and authority, maintaining status, having a voice in the conversation, having a channel to have grievances heard, and autonomy. Folks in this style tend to value and want to have some control or agency in the change that is happening. For those in the I style, connection is particularly important. So that's expression, the ability to express themselves, the relationships, inclusion, some acknowledgement of the stress, some reassurance and support, and also familiarity. For the S style, stability and safety is really important. S's really want some predictability during change, confidence that things will work out, freedom from pressure, and they might need privacy and space to adjust. So while the I style really values expression and wants to have acknowledgement of stress and maybe talk about it and that like support, the S style might be a little bit more reserved and wanting some privacy to process the change on their own as well, and a little bit of space there. And then for the C style, the get it right style, they really want information and understanding. Clear systems, clear expectations, plans to return to normalcy, justification for the change, logical decision making, and information about the situation. Now, it's important to note here that as humans, we don't just fit into these little boxes, right? And so you might hear a set of needs that resonates with you and your style, but also there's probably things that you hear in the other styles that you might feel would be supportive during times of change as well. The other thing that we talked about in the session was that these are needs, but they're not always needs that can be met. But recognizing, especially like, I think one on a self-awareness level, being aware of your own needs, and then also when you're working with others and managing or leading teams, it's good to be aware that the needs that you have might be different than the needs that somebody else has. For example, in the workshop, one of the participants gave an example of having a change happen, and I think it was something that they had really invested their time and work in, and that program was being taken away or changed in some way. And so they were shifting into another area of work, and they felt like their supervisor just kind of silver lined it, like, oh, it's going to be good, it's going to be great for you, without just having some acknowledgement of the stress there. And I think that participant said they resonated with this channel to have grievances heard, that having that space, so that kind of pulls into two different styles, right? But having that space to express and having that acknowledgement, they felt like that would have been so much more helpful than just the positivity and kind of glossing over the impact of the change. So just being aware, and other people will have different needs. Like we heard, for those who have that stability and safety need, having that confidence that things will work out. I would imagine for this style too, it's not just Like, it needs to be grounded in reality, but having some reassurance would be important there too. And we talked about, for example, like predictability. Well, in such a wildly unstable environment, how do you get predictability? Well, it may be that there are things that you can't control, and naming them and being honest about them is important. But what can you control? An example that was shared was that even though programs and people were being shifted around, they were able to keep the space that they were in, their offices or their workspace. And so that was an example given of predictability that might have been particularly grounding for folks who have that need around stability and safety. So thinking about those things, I always encourage people to develop an understanding of their own style, their work and communication preferences, recognizing that there are other valid styles and ways of showing up. One is not better than the other. They're all valuable. Having these different styles represented on a team can be incredibly beneficial. And having this awareness and shared language can be really important. And so the workshop that I gave, a number of the participants were like, we need the whole organization to hear this. We want to share this framework with everybody. And I think that really came from this desire to have understanding and a shared language and an ability to talk through why some of this is so hard and why it brings up conflict as well, and just the different perceptions and the different needs and the different motivations that are there. So I really like this framework. I think it's helpful. And one of the things that I shared too in all of this was then what does it mean to build resilience? And this isn't like a 2-hour workshop, so I'm not going to go through it all here. But for each style, the resilience work is different. So for that D style, the get it done style, it's really about practicing slowing down and asking for help before you need it urgently. For those in that I style that get recognized or get approval, the work is grounding yourself in data and process, not just morale, though morale is important, to acknowledge hard feelings and not just silver linings. For that S, steadiness style, the harmony, get along style, the work there is really to give yourself permission to voice discomfort and just a recognition that absorbing silently protects others at your own expense. And it also weakens the team. S's can really kind of hold back their thoughts, but it doesn't mean that they don't have something valuable to contribute. So the work in being resilient here is flexing, like practicing giving voice to discomfort or raising issues that are important. And then for the C style, that conscientiousness, the get it right style, the resilience work is practice tolerating ambiguity and this acknowledgement that not everything can be analyzed before you act. So each of those will present a challenge to the different styles, but that is important in how we strengthen our ability to grow and to be resilient, is to stretch ourselves in different ways and to get support in that too. So, if you want to know more about the disc or navigating change, I would be happy to talk with you about that. Like I said, I can share with you the process for doing the assessment, and I do coaching, consulting, and workshops on these things. And I'm doing a lot of them lately. I'm going to do another one that ties in this disc framework but looks at conflict and productive and non productive responses to conflict and how to strengthen communication and our ability to navigate conflict effectively. That's the work life stuff, or the work stuff, I guess. The life stuff, just I had these moments today, and this is really part of why I started this podcast, is because I feel like there are just so many kind of reminders and things that I'm learning that I want to capture and share. And so this is the way that I'm doing that right now. But one of them was this observation that I had at my daughter's field trip today. She was in a group that was tasked with figuring out how to get a ball from one cone to the other. I think the distance was about 8 feet. So all they had was these, I think, paper towel rolls that were cut in half or something like that. Kind of this cardboardish thing that was long and curved. And they had to try to figure out how they could move the ball into the basket from 8 feet. And so really what they ended up doing, they first generated some ideas about how they could do it, and then they started practicing. And so they were lining up their paper towel roll that's cut in half, that thing. they were lining that up and then working to roll the ball, basically create kind of a way for the ball to move that distance and then drop into the basket. And what I observed was many of them were able to hang with it. It was not easy. It, like, the first try, it dropped immediately. The second time, it got stuck in a particular place, and then like a little further on. But each time they improved the process. And ultimately, they didn't have time to get it into the basket, but they were able to make the ball go the distance that they had. Just the basket wasn't quite where it needed to be. So I would say they were pretty successful all in all. But I was just observing like the different kids' ability to hang in there with the struggle and the learning, and they had different appetites for, or ability to hang in there, and would also just the way that some of them expressed like frustration with one another or blame, or some of them got the option, or they were told, like, if you don't want to keep doing it, you don't have to. So some people stepped out of the group. And I don't think I have anything like profound to say about this, but one, I was really proud of Ellie and many of her classmates for really sticking with it and continuing to try it. And, you know, I think the facilitator did a good job of also saying it's okay if it drops, but if it drops, you just have to start over and like see what you learn. And seeing that, it made me think about how doing things together, like these, it's problem solving, it's teamwork, it's communication. And I don't know all their kind of working communication styles, I kind of have a guess for Ellie, but just seeing the different styles and then kind of the different temperaments and where they're at and their ability to learn and kind of navigate challenge, it just made me think about like how important activities like that are, and how much that comes up in our day-to-day life. I mean, that was kind of a simulated thing, but like we're constantly problem. Teamwork is important in a lot of situations. In this case, the point the facilitator made was like, if you had to do the same task on your own, would that be easier or harder? And there's no way that you could construct with nothing else there what they did with their hands and holding these things together and then letting the ball go and talking with each other and figuring it out. And they had to communicate with each other like, okay, this one looks a little bit high, whatever. So I was just really grateful to see that and reflect on how important it is, even for our kiddos to practice these skills of teamwork, of communication, and problem solving. And I appreciate the lesson of like, this is about learning and collaboration. And I just want to see more of that. It made me think like, oh my gosh, in addition to math and reading, we really need to do like teamwork and collaboration and communication. And these things often aren't taught. I think that's why I really like doing this work too, is like a lot of times we move through the world just kind of assuming the way that we do things is the right way to do things, or like, if you're new in management, you think what motivates you is what is going to motivate the people who are reporting to you. And that's just not the case. So anyway, I loved just to kind of see that from the third grade perspective today. And then just in the last hour, I said goodbye to some friends. We got together after a fundraiser that I attended, and the group of folks that I met with, it's like former city councilwoman, current city councilwoman, business owner, myself. A few of us are parents, own businesses, doing leadership in all different ways. What really struck me from that conversation was just a reminder that we don't have to do it alone, and a reminder of, and one of the things that I always emphasize with other leaders at different levels, and even thinking about it like if we're looking at parenting as leadership, it's so important to connect with people who understand the role that you're in, whether it's fellow executive directors, development coordinators, council people, electeds, folks who have held leadership positions, other parents. You need your peers. Finding a good group of peers who understand the types of challenges you face, who understand you, who value you, that is so important. And the other thing is, like, we don't have to do it alone. Reach out to your peers, like, try to cultivate that network and lean on each other. I was grateful tonight for that reminder of what I have learned as a leader, is that peers are so important. So I always tell people, like, as a leader, you need to, one, develop your own barometer of success, because people are going to have different opinions about what you should and should not do. And yeah, you should take that into account for sure. But also you need to know your values and how you define success when you're pulled in a whole bunch of different directions. You need to find those peers that understand you, and then also, third, get support outside of them too, whether it's therapy, coaching, whatever care is important to you, your friendships, your life outside of leadership too, or that particular role is really important, and getting support for that is really important. So anyway, like I said, grateful for the reminder, grateful for the opportunity to reflect on leadership in a lot of different ways today. And in the coming weeks, I do feel like this is just a time that is very alive with activity and connection, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm still enjoying having a dog in our life as well. So, yeah, learning all sorts of new things. Well, thanks again for listening in. And if you want to hear more of the Resourced and Resourceful Leadership podcast, please follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. To support the show, please leave a 5-star review and maybe some kind words as well. And share the show with a few people who you think would appreciate it. Please do also check out the link to SpeakPipe in the show notes. I'd love it if you left me a message about what stood out to you from this show or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes. And in the show notes will be the ways to connect with me if you want to talk more about any of the things that came up in today's episode. Thanks again, and take good care.